Welcome to Think 304 Managerial Economics. This is session 2, and my name is Dr. Japama Jekidako. In session 2, we are going to be looking at the behavior of producers separately. Remember what we did in session 1, we looked at the behavior of consumers separately. So we are now going to pretend as if there's no consumer on the market, there's only the producer on the market, and look at the behavior of the producer. Now, why is this important for you to study? Supply is important for us to study or understand under managerial economics because as managers, you need to understand what factors would influence the production of your goods. Like what we saw in demand, this obviously is going to be helping you develop competitive strategies and to respond to the actions of other firms if you have to. And it's also going to help you understand how public policy would influence the supply of your product. Studying supply is therefore very helpful in understanding managerial issues. What are we going to be doing here? We are going to be looking at the definition of supply and also look at the factors that influence the supply of your product. Remember to use Baye and Prince for this session as well. And the title for this book is Managerial Economics and Business Strategy. The 8th edition preferably. If not, any other edition is useful. And also refer to chapter 2 of this edition. Don't restrict yourself to just this textbook. Any good book in managerial economics should be useful. And also look at press, any business press, like The Economist, like the Business and Financial Times, any other thing that you come across, use it for the benefit of this course. What is supply? Supply shows a relationship between the price of a product and how much producers are willing and able to put on the market for sale. Remember, like we did for demand, we are not going to be looking at the individual supply, we are going to be looking at the market supply. We are going to be looking at the market supply because in the real world, we obviously would have several producers producing, apart from monopoly markets where we only have one firm operating. So the market supply would be a horizontal summation of all individual suppliers. This is what we are actually going to be interested in. Now, when we spoke about the definition for supply, we established the relationship between the price of the product and how much producers are willing and able to put on the market for sale. Which means that price of a product, the own price of a product, is an important factor that influences how much producers are willing and able to put on the market for sale. Now, generally, if the price of a product was high, producers would put more on the market for sale. Because remember, the most important intention of a producer is to make profits. So if the price was high, that meant that the producer was going to be making lots of profits. So that would serve as an incentive for the producer to put more on the market for sale. So we expect generally a positive relationship between the price of a product and how much producers are willing and able to put on the market for sale. The opposite is true if the price was low. The price of a product is not the only factor that influences how much producers are willing and able to put on the market for sale. Another thing that one would need to consider if you're a manager is technology. Now, technology is an important factor that would also determine how much you'd put on the market for sale. If generally technology was good, then you'd be able to put more on the market for sale. If technology that you are using was obsolete, then you'll be able to put less on the market for sale, holding every other thing constant. Remember, what we said in demand, that if we take any factor, we are holding every other factor constant and looking at just that factor and its relationship with supply. Cost of production is also another factor that would influence supply. And cost of production would obviously come from the cost of the inputs that are going to be used in production. Holding every other factor constant, generally, if the cost of production was high, producers would be willing and able to put less on the market for sale. If the cost of production was low, producers would be willing to put more on the market for sale because it's less expensive for them to be able to produce. Price of related products would come in here as well. But here, unlike what we saw in demand, substitutes, the definition for substitutes is different, and the definition for complement is also very different. When we talk about substitutes under supply, we are really talking about goods that compete for the use of a particular resource. So like wheat and maize, for instance, are substitutes under the supply because wheat and maize compete for the use of land. So we say that they are substitutes. Now, if wheat and maize are substitutes under supply because we use land for the production of both, then really if there's an increase in the price of one of them, it's definitely going to be influencing the production of the other. If there's an increase in the price of wheat, we expect that producers, as rational as they are, would produce more of wheat and therefore produce less of maize. So if the price of wheat went up, then the production of maize would go down, and therefore there will be a negative relationship between the price of wheat and then the supply of maize. This is very different from the substitutes we considered under demand, where we saw a positive relationship between the price of a related product or the price of a substitute product and the good in question. Again, under supply, when we talk about complements, we are talking about goods that are produced together. So goods that are jointly produced would be considered complements under supply. What do we mean by this? A typical example would be sawdust and plywood. So as you're producing plywood, sawdust obviously would come out of it. So with this, if the price of one of the products went up, you would expect that the production of the other products would also go up. So there's a positive relationship between the price of a complement good and the supply of the good in question here, which is very different from what we saw in demand. Government policies like taxes, subsidies would also influence how much producers are willing and able to put on the market for sale. If taxes were high, generally, you'd expect that producers would be able to put less on the market for sale. If taxes were low, they'll be able to put more on the market for sale. Remember that we distinguish between change in supply and change in quantity supplied in microeconomics. I just want us to recap this over here. By change in supply, we are talking about moving the supply curve either to the right or to the left, because any factor apart from the price of the product itself would have changed. So here, if technology changes, if the price of a related good changes, if taxes change, we would see the supply curve moving either to the right or to the left, depending on the direction of change of these factors. However, a change in quantity supplied refers to a movement along the same supply curve. So if and this obviously is caused by a change in the own price of a product. So if the own price of a product changed, we'll be moving along the same supply curve. Again, taking you to the application bit, we can have a supply function that shows the relationship between supply and all other factors that influence supply. So Px here relates to the price of the own product. PR refers to the price of a related product. W here refers to the price of inputs. And then H here refers to all other factors. So we expect that if we have the equation that we have below, which is QS equals beta naught plus beta XPX plus beta YPY plus beta MW plus beta HH, then BX obviously would have a positive sign because there's a positive relationship between the price of a product, the own price of a product, and the quantity supplied. If beta Y had a positive relationship, then you can think of what type of product we are talking about. We're obviously talking about complements, because if the price of complements went up, then we'll be supplying more of the other product, which is a complement to that other product. If it was negative, then we'll be talking about substitutes. If beta M we expect would have a negative sign, because if the price of an input went up, then obviously the cost of production would go up and would put less on the market for sale. This ends session 2. Hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next session.